I am unaware if there are any congressional members on the Republican side of the House, because Democrats, this probably is not going to apply to them, and they're certainly not going to bring up this particular topic. But if there are any Republican Congress members that are going to be there when Mueller is testifying, I implore you, I request. I am not typically somebody who would vote for you, but I would like you to lend me your ear on this very specific instance. There are questions, problems, contradictions, omissions, things that the Mueller report leave out that Democrats will not ask, but that I am hoping Republicans will. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Progressive Soapbox. And yeah, Mueller is going to testify July 17th. And there are questions that Mueller needs to answer. Now, I think Democrats have been pushing for this because they want to get something out, some more credible way to try to go after Donald Trump. And the more that they put this into the press, this looks as a way of hitting the president in this kind of continuous attack that has taken place since the election. This war of attrition of sorts. However, they may have bitten off more than they can chew on this thing because there are problems with the Mueller report, and those problems need to be enunciated. And I am hoping that if there's a Republican that is watching this channel on this particular date and has my ear for this particular topic, that some of these questions will come up. By the way, guys, if you enjoy this content, you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. This channel often gets its videos demonetized just because of the topic. In this case, just talking about news in an honest, real way will get your channel, for the most part, demonetized. So let's talk about it. And I'm going to lean on Aaron Matei for some of this stuff, and I've even invited him back onto the show. He ghosted me on the last few times, so hopefully he's not going to ghost me again. But I've invited him onto the show to talk about this very specific issue in kind of somewhat of a timeline fashion, but I want to talk about it more from the standpoint of the questions that I've asked over the time period of this show, where I've showed serious skepticism with this narrative that was put forth and that the Democrats and the media have ran with and blown to high heaven since the election. I have contended and I've argued that all of these people had a dog in the hunt and something to get out of it, which incentivized their reasoning for pushing the narrative forth. Democratic Party did not like the fact that their establishment candidate lost to reality show hosts, ergo, it is easier to scream Russia as opposed to deal with the failings of your party and the loss of legitimacy and credibility of your audience and your voter base. The media hated Donald Trump's guts, and any opportunity they could find to hit Donald Trump, they were going to jump on the bandwagon and take it. Some of them may have believed it. Some of them may thought they were doing God's work in going after Donald Trump. But there were some executives that looked at this as a financial boon. And it was. The President of the United States working with a foreign power. Oh, it's intriguing. It's Tom Clancy-esque. Let's run with it. As one of them said, it's not necessarily great for America, but it is great for our business. I want to go into further questions, however, that Mueller should answer. Mueller put his report out. Mueller, at that point, says, look, my report is the only thing that you need to see from me. You don't need to see anything else. And he tried to go away. Well, that wasn't good enough. Democrats calling him to testify. And now, some of the failings, omissions, what may be considered misstatements, contradictions, problems, can now be aired to the public. And I'm going to start that airing right now. Mr. Mueller, did at any point in your investigation, did you consider that the Russians did not do this? Meaning, did you take the perspective from jump, based on media coverage and all this other stuff that was out there, that the Russian government did this and it was a foregone conclusion? Because a lot of the Mueller report, even though it makes no connection between Trump and Russia, it just legitimizes this notion that the Russian government has something to do with it. And the report, in many essence, is a documentation of that. Did you at any point consider, however, that it wasn't the Russians? And I'm asking this question for a very specific reason. There are certain things in the report that if you look at it, not from the perspective that the Russians had something to do with it, but from the perspective of maybe a private enterprise running its business, or people maybe misremembering, that maybe it wasn't indeed the Russians. Did you even consider it for one moment that there were elements of your own government that may have disliked Donald Trump, that may have political biases, that may have been in positions to do things to try to make this look as if it was more than what it was, essentially hyped up hysteria and politicization of an issue? Now, that answer, whatever that answer is, and I'm asking this question for a very specific reason. The troll farm. The troll farm. Images in that troll farm ran the gambit. That troll farm existed before the election, and most of the ads took place after the election. If it existed before the election and ads were taking place mostly after the election, how are you saying that this was specifically related to the election? And even when the information came out, they said it was just trying to sow discord. Is it possible that a private entity, a troll farm that was based out of Russia, just so happened was using the election because they were a clickbait farm, and it is clickbaitable when an election is taking place? Meaning, I do a show, and there are more hits on my show talking about the election when an election is taking place. If this is a clickbait farm and their goal is to get clicks, then putting out content that's related to the election would seem to be a logical way of getting those clicks. Did you consider from that perspective, meaning the perspective that it wasn't the Russian government working with this notion of trying to undermine American democracy, that this might have been a private enterprise trying to maximize its profit, a capitalistic enterprise? There was no connection made. It was unsealed last night that a judge slapped down this notion that a connection could be made between Russia and the private enterprise, and that if that connection exists, and it may exist, that the Mueller and that document did not make that clear. Meaning the judge was considering holding them in contempt because they came out saying that the Russian government was working with this private enterprise, meaning the IRA, the one that's in court right now, that came to court, that I would imagine Mueller never thought was going to come to court. My point is this. The judge made it very clear that you cannot make the connection between the Russian government and the private enterprise. All you can say is that the private enterprise did something that were putting out Facebook and Twitter ads. The connection was not established. Is it possible that your perspective was skewed? Let's go further. Even beyond the perspective being skewed on that point. Why did you not ever interview Assange? That seemed to be a big deal to me. You are asserting that Assange was somehow working with some kind of Russian agency. The Russians, supposedly hacked democracy itself and getting its hands on the democratic information. But you're asserting that Assange had some relation to this and that they were working with the Russians in some way. But it seems that the person who would know that would be Assange himself. He was holed up in an embassy. He was there for you to interview. He consistently said that the Russians had nothing to do with it. And yet, you assert that the Russians did. There's a contradiction here. Why didn't you go to the source? My contention is somewhat straightforward. My contention is, if you really wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on, you would deal with Assange. You would interview Assange. You would question Assange on this very specific issue, saying this issue is one of the mainstays in the report itself. You had a raid on Roger Stone's house. Raided it like it was a compound. Like he was held up in the Fuhrer bunker and these guys were going to get him. Roger Stone, and even in his own testimony, did not know about the stuff before WikiLeaks publicly went forward with their times that they were going to put the information out. Meaning Roger Stone didn't know squat. And you raided the guy's house like it was a compound. You could do that for the compound, but you didn't do that for the DNC servers. Why not? That seems to be a big deal. And not just a big deal, we find out later on that the DNC and the company that the DNC was paying redacted the information that the FBI was given. So not only did you not get your hands on the servers, the information that CrowdStrike and the DNC gave you was redacted. Meaning, In your report, how can you make any straightforward assertions about anything containing a hacking when you never even looked at the servers? I have questions. These are questions. These are omissions. These are things that Mueller needs to answer for. The Steele dossier. The FBI knew that Steele was a politicized instrument and that Steele was trying to get this information out to the public. How did they know? They knew this because Steele and one of the officers wrote a memo attesting to the fact that Steele was trying to get this information out before Election Day, that this was a politicized document paid for by the DNC. Why didn't they tell that to the FISA court? Not only is that important, that is somewhat of a crime. Why didn't they tell the FISA court that this was a politicized instrument, that Steele was a politicized weapon of sorts, that wanted to get this out just before the election to hit Donald Trump with it? Why didn't the FBI tell the FISA court? That's somewhat of a crime. That's something they're supposed to disclose. 99.7% of the items brought before the FISA court are approved, but at the very least, you still need to tell them of the contradicting issues. Let's go further. And I'm going to go into Aaron Matei's document because Matei has been Johnny on the spot on this. Let's go further. I did that one. Those are ones I brought up on my own. Christopher Steele, also a DNC contractor, was not a neutral party. This puts two Democratic hired contractors squarely behind underlying allegations of an affair, a key circumstance that Mueller ignores. He's talking about CrowdStrike and Steele, meaning Steele from the Steele dossier. And I kind of made the point before that they knew that Steele was a politicized instrument before they called for the counterintelligence investigation into Trump. That should be a big deal. Misfit. One of the things that Misfit or that the Steele dossier makes, that Mueller puts forth, is that Misfit was some kind of, essentially Misfit is the guy who supposedly put Papadopoulos in contact with the Russians. Now, Misfit, comes to find out, is not a Russian asset at all, but was an intelligence asset of the United States. Now, this looks a little weirder. Did Mueller not know this? I mean, when someone asked Mueller, did he not know that Misfit was an intelligence asset of the United States? I mean, after all, he's been investigating this for like 2 or 3 years with all of these high-profile attorneys that are looking and chomping at the bit to squeeze this guy and throw this guy in prison. They threw Papadopoulos in jail for 2 weeks for lying about a date of some effect. But I guess my point is this. A lot of this stuff seems to be overhyped and politicized. And there are questions in the report of, did Mueller not know that? Papadopoulos argues that he never told the guy or the Australian, what's his name, Downer. He never told Downer about the information that he got from Misfit talking about the emails that the Russians had. And by the way, it's not illegal for somebody to inform Papadopoulos about meaning about emails that the Russians have, nor is it illegal for Papadopoulos to try to arrange a meeting with some kind of Russian, any random Russian. And yet those things were almost criminalized in the way that people went about them and went about talking about them. Just saying. Let's keep going. I'm not going to keep this long, but I do have questions. And if there's any random Republican that gets their hand on this video, I would love for these questions to be asked to Mueller. Here's another one. John Brennan, director of the CIA, played a seminal and overlooked role in all facets of what became the Mueller's investigation. The suspicions that triggered their initial collusion probe, the allegations of Russian interference, and the intelligence assessment that purported to validate the interference allegations that Brennan himself helped generate. Yet, Brennan has since revealed himself to be, like CrowdStrike and Steele, hardly a neutral party. In fact, partisan with deep animus towards Trump. The point of this is straightforward. If there are multiple elements of this that have political motives involved in this, How can you overlook that? How can you pretend that these are just people doing their jobs, looking out for the best interests of America, and that they're in no way would act in ways that would try to hit an adversary? This case is falling apart. It's not to be said that it is impossible that the Russians will go about trying to influence the elections. Big countries or governments or powerful interests do what they do. But in this case, the argument here is that the Russian government was working to undermine our election. And what they have shown in this has been lacking, even though, for the most part, the mainstream media has run wild with it. And of course, the Democratic Party, but mainstream media and the Democratic apparatus itself and the Democratic media has gone hog wild as if it is a fact. And the point here is, it's not a fact at all. And even in the Mueller report itself, Mueller doesn't say that the Russian government did what they're talking about. Mueller, at most, makes the point that the Russian government was working through entities. But again, as the judge kind of made the point very clear today or yesterday, they did not prove or show that. They're asserting that. And there's a difference in those things. And there's a company in court right now trying to make that extraordinarily plain. I hope he comes on the show. I would love to talk to him about it. And I just want to make sure I don't want to miss any of his. The report used qualified and vague language to describe key events, including that Mueller and his investigators do not actually know for certain whether the Russian intelligence officers stole the Democratic Party emails or how those emails were transferred to WikiLeaks. I did a show on this several months ago where I made the point that in the document, I even showed the place in the document where Mueller, his language doesn't say that this clearly took place because Mueller doesn't quite know. He's asserting, he's alluding to, but he doesn't quite know. He doesn't know if the Russian government hacked. He doesn't know if the WikiLeaks or how those were passed, if they were indeed hacked, meaning if the DNC was in fact hacked. He doesn't know any of that stuff. Those things are asserted. And the vague language in the document itself kind of alludes to that. And my point is very plain. If he wanted to know for certain, he would have went to the person who would know. Julian Assange, who at that point was sitting in an embassy, the same place he had been for the last 7 years. Here's another one that's interesting. The report's timeline of events appeared to defy logic. According to its narrative, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange announced the publication of Democratic Party emails not only before he received the documents, but before he even communicated with the source that provided them. There's strong reason to doubt Mueller's assertion that the alleged Russian cutout called Lucifer 2.0 supplied the stolen emails to Assange. Mueller's decision not to interview Assange, a central figure who claimed Russia was not behind the hack, suggests an unwillingness to explore avenues of evidence on fundamental questions. Right there. I love that he said that, because that's the way I was thinking about this. It was like, if your goal was really to get to the bottom of this, there's certain things that you would do. It didn't seem that the point was to get to the bottom of this. And again, my first question I think is the most pertinent. Did you consider other avenues, other perspectives that didn't involve the Russian government attacking American democracy itself, such as elements of the intelligence community that may have had certain biases and may have been in positions to, let's say, push, tweak. And look, even if you want to make the argument within the degree of liberation, meaning within their freedom of decision space, to the degree that they could do things to push the envelope to try to, hype this up, that they did those things. And that in doing so, it allowed an investigation. Even if you want to go that route, fair enough. But let's just be very clear that the question is, did you think of any other scenario than the Russian government trying to hack and attack democracy? Did you? Did you come at this in a way that might have considered that elements of our own intelligence community might have been involved in this? And if the answer is no, then this report is which I strongly suspect that the answer is no. I strongly suspect that the narrative here was to instantiate the narrative, not necessarily to come away with some other possible conclusion to what took place in 2016. Mueller was the cleanup man. Mueller wasn't a guy to get answers. There's a difference in those things. I'll end this here because this video has gone far, far too long. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. Share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all. And this.